I hid my scars under my dress. The zipper split at my shoulder 3 seconds before my stepbrother lifted his glass to toast me, and the whole ballroom saw the corner of a scar I had spent 10 years hiding under silk. I felt the fabric give. I felt cold air where cold air should not have been. I heard a woman near the ice swans draw a breath sharp enough to cut. I did not turn around. I kept my chin exactly where my mother had taught me to keep it, and I did not let Whitman see my face change. That was the wound. This was the night it opened again. This was the night a man I had never officially met walked across a room full of senators and quietly put his jacket over my shoulders, like he had been waiting 10 years for the right moment to do it. My name is Adeline Marchetti. Everyone who is allowed close enough calls me Della. I sew wedding gowns for a living in a narrow atelier on Newbury Street, because the only thing my mother left me before the pneumonia took her was a sewing machine and a rule that said a woman with clever hands never has to marry for shelter. 19 was the year of the accident that was not an accident, though I did not know the second half of that sentence yet. 19 was the year my stepfather's family taught me what a signature is worth when a girl is too dazed on morphine to read what she is signing. 10 years later, I still wear long sleeves in July. 10 years later, I still flinch when a hand comes near my collar in a crowded elevator. 10 years later, a zipper failed at exactly the wrong moment, in exactly the wrong room, and the past I had stitched shut with my own 2 hands started to unravel in front of 300 people who had spent a decade being told a very expensive version of what happened to me. The room was the old Ashcroft carriage house on Beacon Hill, opened once a year for the Hale family winter benefit, which raised money for a foundation my stepfather's brother had built to help burn survivors. That was the joke of my life, told quietly, only to myself. The Hales raised money for burn survivors, and I was a burn survivor the Hales had raised into silence. Every December I was invited to stand near the dessert table wearing something long-sleeved so the donors could see the family cared. This year they had asked me to wear one of my own designs on the floor. This year, standing under a chandelier the size of a small car, my stepbrother Whitman had already taken the microphone. Then the zipper split. The fabric slid 2 inches down my shoulder. A ribbon of raised, pale, ropey scar tissue showed itself along the top of my collarbone, and a man standing near the far window turned his head toward me the way a hunting dog turns toward a sound the rest of the room cannot hear yet. I did not know him. I knew of him. Everyone in Boston with a pulse knew of him. Rocco Salvi. The Salvis had poured half the concrete in the North End and had been rumored to have poured other things into the harbor over the years, though nobody said that at parties. He was tall in a plain black suit with no tie, top button open at his throat, hands loose at his sides in the way of men who have never had to prove they are dangerous, because everyone in the room has already agreed that they are. He was watching me, and he had seen the scar, and his face had done a thing I could not read. Not pity, not curiosity. Something quieter. Something that looked, from across a room full of chandeliers, almost like recognition. Whitman kept talking. I heard the beginning of a sentence about family, and the middle of a sentence about legacy, and the end of a sentence about the girl he was calling his sister, and none of the 3 sentences belonged to me. They belonged to a story the Hales had been telling the donors for 10 years, and I had been the mannequin they dressed it on every December. I did not hear it clearly because I was busy pinching the fabric back onto my shoulder and trying to appear as if I were only adjusting a strap. The woman next to me offered a safety pin. I took it. My hands did not shake until I was 3 rooms clear of the podium, in the narrow gallery where the caterers stored the coat racks, and even then they only shook once, because a woman with clever hands does not have the luxury of trembling for long. I was still pinning myself back together when he found me. Not Whitman. Him. Rocco stopped in the doorway of the gallery and did not step inside, which was the first courtesy anyone had shown me all evening. "Your zipper," he said. Quiet. "There is a woman in the kitchen with a proper needle. I can send her if you like. She works for me. She is discreet." I stared at him. I had expected almost anything except practical kindness. "I have a needle," I said. My voice came out steadier than the rest of me felt. "I always have a needle. It is the first thing I put in a pocket before I put keys." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Of course you do. He set a glass of water on the small side table between us. He did not step closer. His eyes went once to the pinned shoulder of my gown, and I felt the old panic climb up my neck the way it always climbed when a stranger looked too long at the place where the fabric ended and my skin began. And then his eyes went back to my face and stayed there, and the panic uncurled itself, because he had chosen my face on purpose. Rocco Salvi, he said finally, offering nothing more than the name. I know. Most people pretend they don't. Most people are better liars than I am. I have been sewing lies into hemlines for 10 years. I know how the stitching feels. He almost smiled. He did not extend his hand, which I later understood was another courtesy. He had seen me flinch when the woman with the safety pin had brushed my sleeve, and he had filed it away, and he had decided, without asking me, that he was not going to be another person my body had to brace itself against tonight. Your brother, he said, not a question. Stepbrother, and he is about to come looking for me, and I would rather not be found in a coat gallery with the most photographed man in the North End when he does. Understood. The terrace above the garden is empty. The stairs are behind the kitchen. There is a door propped with a brick. If you need a place to breathe for 10 minutes, I will not follow you. If you want me to follow you, walk slow. Then he was gone, and I stood alone with a safety pin in my collarbone, and a decision in my mouth I had not yet spoken out loud. Before I climbed those stairs, I went back into the ballroom because I had a job to do. I found the two Hale cousins in their presentation gowns near the string quartet. I adjusted a hem. I smiled at Whitman's mother across the room, and she smiled back, and neither of us meant it. I did all of that in a gown pinned closed at the shoulder with a safety pin, and only my hands knew how tightly I was holding myself together. Then Whitman found me. He always found me. Della, you disappeared during my toast. My strap gave out. You should have told me. I would have paused. I did not want you to pause. He studied me. He had a soft, expensive face, the kind that photographed well, and behind that face there was a boy who had once locked me in a sewing closet for 6 hours when I was 15 because I had told his father the truth about a broken lamp. He knew I never forgot that boy. There is a paper, he said quietly, in my father's study, upstairs. 2 signatures, yours and mine. If you sign it tonight, the foundation clears its audit tomorrow, and the family stops asking anything of you for good. If you do not sign it tonight, my father is going to bring up the accident during the closing remarks. He has been drinking. He is going to point at you and thank you for surviving. He is going to do it in front of the cameras. Would you like that, Della? Would you like to be thanked? The floor did not tilt. I had trained the floor not to tilt around him a long time ago, but my breath went shallow, and he saw it. Upstairs, study, before the closing remarks. Do not make me come looking for you a second time. Then he was gone, and I stood alone with the taste of copper in my mouth. If you have ever felt a room close around you like a fist, if you have ever stood in a beautiful place and understood you were only invited because your silence was on the guest list, do me a small favor before I keep going. Tap the little heart under this video and follow along, because the next hour of Della's night is the hour her whole life turned on, and I do not want you to lose the thread on the way. The stairs behind the kitchen smelled like old wood and rosemary. The brick was where he had said it would be. I pushed the door open and stepped out onto a small gravel terrace strung with cold white lights, and Rocco Salvi was standing at the low wall with his back to the door, looking down at the garden the way a man looks at a chessboard he has already solved. I walked slow, I said. I noticed. I crossed the gravel and stood a careful 3 feet from him. Below us, the city ran downhill in long ribbons of light toward the harbor, the way a life looks when you finally have enough distance from it to see the shape. I do not do this, I said. Go to rooftops with men I have not been introduced to. I introduced myself, and I did not ask you to come. I told you where a door was. He turned his head then. He had a thin, old scar through one eyebrow. I have been at every one of these benefits for 6 years, Miss Marchetti. I have never once spoken to a Hale. I stand near the window and I write a check and I leave. Tonight I broke a rule I keep on purpose, because your zipper split, and I saw your shoulder, and I did something impolite. I stared. Why? He turned a cufflink at his wrist, and I understood he was not fidgeting. He was buying himself the seconds he needed to answer honestly, instead of easily. Because I know that scar, he said finally. Not the shape of one like it. That one. I felt the wind go out of me the way it goes out of a room when a window closes on it. I do not know what you mean, I said. I think you do. I think you have been afraid someone would say that sentence to you for 10 years. I do not want to be the wrong person to say it. So I am going to ask you a question, and if the answer is no, I will walk down these stairs and never speak to you again. Miss Marchetti, were you in the passenger seat of a black Lincoln that went off the ramp near the boathouses when you were 19 years old? The cold on my shoulder was suddenly the only thing in the world I could feel. I nodded, once, because my mouth had forgotten how to shape words. He closed his eyes for a slow second. When he opened them again, they were wet in a way I had not expected on the face of a man the papers called the quietest, dangerous man in Boston. I did not know your name. I have been looking for it for 10 years. Nobody in the hospital would tell me. The family had already put a lawyer on the door by the time I got back with a nurse. The gravel under my heels stopped feeling solid. You are the boy. I was the boy. I pulled you out. I burned my hands doing it. He held up his palms briefly, and I saw the old, glossy patches along the base of both. I lost my brother in a fire when I was 12. I do not walk past car fires. When I saw the smoke, I ran down the embankment, and the door was jammed, and there was a girl inside crying, and I got the door open, and I got her out, and I ran for help. By the time I came back, a man in a suit had already put her in a private ambulance. He gave me $200 for my hands and told me to forget the license plate. I did not forget the license plate. It was registered to the Hale family. I sat down. My legs decided for me. I sat down on the low stone wall with the whole scaffolding of my life sliding sideways underneath me. They told me a stranger had helped me. They told me the stranger had disappeared. I imagine they did. I looked up at him. There was no triumph on his face, only a very old grief that had finally been allowed to sit down next to a very old question. Why did you come tonight, really? Because I heard your name for the first time 3 weeks ago. A friend of mine works for the state auditor's office. Your name was in a memo about the Hale Foundation. Somebody inside the family has been moving money through the Burn Survivors Fund for years, and your signature is on the paperwork that lets them do it. I came tonight to see if you were the girl. I did not come to talk to you. Then why are you talking to me? Because your zipper split, and I am not apparently as disciplined a man as I thought I was. The wind shifted then, cold enough to raise goose flesh along my arms, and without a word he took off his jacket and held it toward me. I took it. 10 years of instinct told me a coat from a man in this city came with an invoice folded into the lining. But a man who had burned his own hands for me at 17 and never once told anyone did not seem like a man who kept invoices. I have to tell you the rest, I said. Whitman was driving that night. Whitman was drunk. 20 minutes before he put the car through that guardrail, he told me he had a folder in the back seat his father did not know about. He said he was going to burn it. He said he was going to burn it with me in the car if I did not stop asking about my mother's accounts. I laughed. I laughed at him, Mr. Salvi. He took the ramp at 80. The folder caught first. My dress caught next. He tried to kill you. I do not know if he tried. I know he did not care whether I lived. I know a folder burned that night the state auditor would have liked very much to read. I know I have been the only living witness to it for 10 years. He cornered me 20 minutes ago and told me to be in his father's study before the closing remarks. He wants one last signature. I am not going to sign it. Rocco was very still. It was the kind of stillness I had already learned belonged to him when he was deciding something. You have carried this alone for 10 years, Miss Marchetti. You do not have to carry the last 4 hours of it alone. The state auditor's office is at the coat check downstairs. They cannot enter until a named beneficiary of the foundation files a complaint on the record. That would be you. You are the door. That is why Whitman wants your signature tonight. If you sign it, you cease to be a beneficiary, and the foundation is safe from you forever. If you do not sign it, and you say 5 words in front of the right witness before 11 o'clock, the state comes in through the front door. What are the 5 words? I want to file a complaint. Who is the right witness? The woman in the gray dress near the ice sculpture. She is a deputy attorney general. She was invited tonight because the Hales like being photographed with her. She has been briefed. She is waiting. You planned this. I prepared it. I did not plan it. I did not know you were going to say yes. I did not know your zipper was going to split. I only knew that if any of those things happened, I did not want to be caught flat-footed. I looked at him. Give me 10 minutes. There is one thing I need to do first. Whitman is going to come looking for me the second his uncle tells him I refused. I want him to find me in front of the room. I want him to say what he came to say in a place where he cannot take it back. That is dangerous. So is not doing it. He held my eyes for a long second. 2 of my men will be 4 feet from you the entire time. You will not see them. If he touches you, he does not walk out of this building on his own feet. Della. It was the first time he had used my name, my real name, the one only people I trusted got to say out loud. When you open that shoulder tonight, look at me. Not at him, not at the room. Look at me. I'm going to be standing in front of you, and I'm going to remember what your face looks like on the other side of it, and I'm going to make sure you do too. Why? Because you were 19 when they burned you, and I was 17 when I could not do anything about it. And neither one of us is those ages anymore, and we get to decide, tonight, what to do with the years we have had since. We walked back down. In the gallery of coats, before we stepped back into the light, he took his jacket from my shoulder and adjusted the safety pin in my zipper without touching my skin. His fingers moved the way a man moves who has been trusted with delicate things before and has not broken any of them. There. You look ready. I do not feel ready. Ready is a lie people tell themselves to feel less alone. You do not have to be ready. You only have to be next. At 10:15, Senator Douglas Hale, Whitman's uncle, moved through the crowd toward me with a glass of something amber in his hand, and I felt the temperature of my life drop another degree. Adeline, you look thin. Are you eating? I eat, Senator. You should come for Sunday dinner. My brother left you a very generous arrangement in his will. You have never once drawn on it. Your brother left me nothing that was not already my mother's. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who had been given bad news about his stock portfolio and had chosen not to react in public. Whitman has a document for you upstairs. I understand you have been reluctant to come sign it. This family has been very patient with you. This family has paid for your surgeries, your rehabilitation, your apartment, your little shop on Newbury. It would be a great shame if my brother had to stand up during his closing remarks and tell the room how difficult the past decade has been for us, because of one girl's inability to sign a piece of paper. Do we understand each other? My voice came out level, the way my mother's voice used to come out level when she was about to say something she had been holding for a long time. My mother paid for that shop, Senator. My mother paid for my surgeries. My mother paid for everything I have, and she paid for it before you ever met her. And you have been drawing on her accounts for 10 years and calling it charity. His smile did not move. His eyes did. That is a very unfortunate thing to say out loud in a room like this one. Then leave the room. He lifted his amber glass in a small toast that nobody around us understood was not a toast, and he walked away, and I did not breathe until he was 10 feet clear of me. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something honestly, because the next choice Della makes is the one I keep thinking about, and I want to know what you would have done. If a man like that had cornered you in a beautiful room, if you had spent 10 years being fed by people who were eating out of your own mother's pocket, would you have walked out the front door and been done with them? Or would you have stayed in that room, in a torn dress, and made them tell the truth in front of every donor they had ever charmed? Tell me down in the comments. I read them. Whitman found me at 10:37. I had planted myself deliberately in the widest part of the ballroom, near the small raised platform where his father was going to give the closing remarks. There was a semicircle of donors around me because I had struck up a conversation with the mayor's wife about the embroidery on her sleeve. And once you have 3 donors listening, you have 30. He came at me from the left, with his microphone smile on, and I saw the sheet of folded paper in his inside jacket pocket. Della, there you are. I need you upstairs. I am not going upstairs tonight. He stopped smiling for exactly a quarter of a second, and I watched every donor within earshot register that quarter second and file it away. Della, you are making a scene. I have not made a scene yet, Whitman. If I make one, you will know. He glanced past my shoulder. I did not have to turn to know Rocco was standing behind me. I felt the temperature of the room adjust around his presence the way a room adjusts around a fireplace. Salvi, Whitman said. Hail. Miss Marchetti has already indicated this is not a family matter. You have known her for an hour. I have known her longer than that. I was on the embankment. I have the burn scars on my hands to prove it. Ask your uncle whether he wants to know how long. Whitman's face went white in patches, the way faces do when the blood decides on its own to leave certain rooms of the body first. He looked at Rocco's hands. Rocco held them up, palms out, briefly, and I watched Whitman's expensive face recognize the shape of an old story he had not been told was still alive. You are the boy who ran up the embankment. I am the man who ran up the embankment. Your father gave me $200 and told me to forget the license plate. I did not forget. I did not forget the folder in the back seat either. I heard you screaming about it as I pulled her out. You were not screaming for her. You were screaming for the folder. I have thought about that every single day for 10 years, and I am going to think about it out loud in this room in the next 90 seconds, unless you take the paper out of your jacket pocket and hand it to me right now and say the words, I withdraw the request. Whitman did not move. Say the words, Hale. You cannot do this. I am doing it. His hand went involuntarily to the paper in his pocket. Then it dropped. Whitman had never, in his entire life, learned to lose a room quietly. Della had surgeries, he said, turning to the semicircle of donors. His voice climbed a full note. This family has paid for 10 years of her care. Tonight, at our own benefit, she has decided to embarrass us for reasons I frankly do not understand. Her scars are the reason this foundation exists. She should be grateful. The word grateful landed in the room like a stone into a still pond. I felt Rocco's hand at the small of my back once, briefly, an anchor, and then I stepped forward, out from the semicircle, into the small clear space in front of the platform, and I lifted my hands to the safety pin at my shoulder. Della, do not. You said the word grateful, I said. My voice came out clearer than I had expected. I want the room to see what you would like me to be grateful for. I pulled the pin. The zipper gave the rest of the way with a small, dry sound, and the shoulder of my gown slid down my arm, and I held it there at the elbow, so the fabric would not fall further than I meant it to. I turned, slowly, so that every donor in the semicircle could see what a 10-year-old burn from a car fire looks like when it has been hidden under silk for a decade. The scars ran along my collarbone, up my shoulder, down my back in a long, ropey vine that had once been an open wound and had healed into a map of what had happened to me. I heard a woman gasp. I heard a man say, "Oh my God," quietly. I did not look at any of them. I looked at Rocco, and Rocco looked back, and his face did not flinch, and his face did not pity, and his face did the one thing I had not known I needed a face to do in that moment. It stayed. I want to file a complaint, I said, loud enough for the woman in the gray dress to hear me from 10 feet away. Against the Hale Family Foundation, against Whitman Hale, against Senator Douglas Hale. I am a named beneficiary of this fund. I have never received $1 from it. I would like the state to look at the books. The Deputy Attorney General set her drink down without hurrying. She crossed the marble in her small gray shoes and touched my elbow gently, the way a nurse touches a patient before doing something that might sting. On the record, Miss Marchetti? On the record. Then I need you to say the sentence one more time, clearly, in the presence of these witnesses. I said it again. I said it slower. I said it with my shoulder still bare and the scar still catching the chandelier light. Because if we were going to do this in front of 300 donors, We were going to do it where they could not later claim they had misheard the woman in the torn gown. The front doors of the carriage house opened 40 seconds later. 2 officers in plain suits, an evidence tech, and a woman from the auditor's office with a warrant already folded in her hand. They did not run. They asked politely for Senator Hale by name, and Senator Hale had already understood that his evening had ended without his permission. Whitman did not walk. Whitman lunged. He went for me. I saw it happen the way you see a car cross the yellow line, a full second before it should be possible. His hand came up. His face was no longer white in patches. It was red now, all the way through, the way a face goes red when a boy who has been the largest thing in every room of his life discovers, in one instant, that the room has stopped belonging to him. He did not reach me. One of Rocco's men, whom I still could not have picked out of a lineup, closed the distance with a movement so efficient it looked almost gentle, and Whitman went down on one knee onto the marble with his own wrist folded behind his back, and the microphone smile finally, permanently, gone from his face. "Do not," Rocco said, quiet, almost bored. "You have already lost the room. Do not lose the century of Hale name your grandfather built by putting your hand on a woman in front of the Deputy Attorney General." The officers walked Whitman past us and out through the side door, and I understood watching them work that the 10 years I had spent stitching my life closed under long sleeves had ended in the length of a zipper. Rocco did not touch me until Whitman was through the side door. He stood exactly where he had promised he would stand, close but not touching, until I was ready. When I turned toward him with my gown still open at the shoulder, I did not pull the fabric back up, because I did not want to hide anymore in front of the man who had already seen everything worth hiding. "You said as close as I would let you stand." I said that. "Stand closer." He stepped in. He lifted his jacket from a nearby chair and put it around my shoulder himself, careful, the way you cover a thing that matters. Then he did the thing I had not, in 10 years of hiding, allowed myself to imagine anyone ever doing. He bent his head. He put his mouth, so soft I barely felt it, against the ropey top of the scar at my collarbone. Then he moved half an inch, and did it again. Then again, along the ridge that ran up to my shoulder. He was not kissing me the way strangers kiss. He was kissing the places I had spent a decade apologizing for, one at a time, the way a man says a prayer he has been carrying since he was 17 years old, and had finally been allowed to say out loud. I did not cry. I had told myself I would not cry in that room. I did not cry until later, alone, in a car he had asked me if I wanted, and even then I only cried once, and only briefly, because a woman with clever hands does not have the luxury of trembling for long, and because for the first time in a decade, my hands did not have anything left they were required to hold together. Before I tell you the last of it, do me one more small favor. If you have carried a scar under your sleeve, under a laugh, under a Sunday dinner you were told to smile through, tap the little heart under this video for the woman in the gray dress who did not run across the marble tonight, but who moved anyway, and for every quiet person in your own life who has ever moved toward you at exactly the right speed. And tell me one thing in the comments if you have not yet, because it is a different question than the one I asked before. Would you have let him kiss the scars? Or would you have pulled the fabric back up first, the way I almost did, before I remembered whose shoulder it was? Here is what happened after. The foundation collapsed in the papers by Wednesday. The senator did not resign. He was resigned by his party by Thursday morning. Whitman was arraigned on a Friday afternoon on charges I did not read because Rocco had asked, gently, whether I wanted to be the person who read them or the person who ate lunch instead, and I chose lunch. The folder from the back seat of the black Lincoln, which had not, it turned out, entirely burned, had lived for 10 years in the evidence locker of a retired traffic officer who had suspected at the time that the fire had been set on purpose and had kept the singed pages in a manila envelope in his garage in case anyone ever came looking. Someone finally came looking. The house in Somerville came back to me in the spring. My mother's little house, with the yellow kitchen she had painted herself the summer she was pregnant with me, and the crooked back step my grandfather had never gotten around to fixing. I did not move into it. I walked through it once, alone, on a Tuesday morning, and I stood in the yellow kitchen for a long time, and I understood that a house is not the same thing as a home once the people who made it a home are gone. Then I sold it. I used the money to buy the atelier on Newbury outright, and to hire 2 young seamstresses whose mothers had also died young, and to put a small brass plaque above the door that said Marchetti, because my mother's name had been on the deed of that house before it had been on any Hale paperwork, and I wanted her name on a door again, somewhere in this city, where the wind could find it. Rocco did not move fast with me. He did not ask me to. He came to the atelier on Thursdays after work with a bag of pastries from a bakery in the North End, and he sat in the front room, and he read while I sewed. On the first warm evening of April, I asked him whether he wanted to see the rest of the scars, the ones below the collarbone that no one had ever seen except a nurse in 2016, and my own bathroom mirror. And he said, "Only if you want me to, Della." And I said, "I want you to." And he did what he had done at the benefit, quietly, in the small apartment above my atelier, with the windows open onto Newbury Street and the late light coming in gold across the floor. He kissed every one. He did not hurry. He treated my body the way a careful person treats an old letter that has been folded too long. And by the time he was finished, I understood that I had been waiting 10 years for someone to read that letter out loud, and not flinch at the sentences. Here is what I keep coming back to, months later, when I think about that night. The moment that mattered was not the kiss on the collarbone. It was not the arrest. It was not the folder in the evidence locker or the plaque above my door. The moment that mattered was 3 seconds before I pulled the pin, when I looked across a room full of donors who had eaten off my mother's money for 10 years, and I understood, standing there in a torn dress, that the only person in that room who had the power to decide what my scars meant was me. Not Whitman, not the senator, not the stranger in the black suit who had been waiting a decade to keep a promise he had made to himself on an embankment when he was 17. Me. That was the choice nobody could sign away, and I had been carrying it under my sleeve for 10 years without knowing it was there. I still sew for a living. I still keep needles in every pocket of every coat I own. I still wear long sleeves sometimes, in December, when the wind off the Charles gets sharp. But I wear them now because I am cold, not because I am hiding. There is a man who comes home to me on Thursdays with a paper bag of pastries and a habit of resting his hand, very briefly, on the top of my shoulder as he passes behind my chair. And every time he does it, I remember what a chandelier looks like from the wrong side of a scar. And I remember that I walked out of that room on my own 2 feet. And I remember that I was the one who chose to. That is the story. That is all of it. The needle is back in my pocket. The dress is folded on the shelf. And somewhere in the North End, a quiet man is turning a cufflink at his wrist and waiting for Thursday.